Hi everyone, my name is Ryan. Welcome to Math with RG. Today we're working on linear functions for Algebra 1, graphing linear equations. Okay, so we're working on the x and y intercepts. So let's talk about intercepts. What is an x-intercept, right? What does that mean? Okay, so let's break it down. X-intercept. So it means, right, if we have the x-axis, the line will intercept that axis at a certain point. And so in order to figure that out, right, we can figure it out visually, right? So if they give us a picture or if they give us a table, then we have to do it a slightly different way. Or if they give us an equation, just a slightly different way. So again, the x-intercept, the line, right? The linear or the line is crossing the x at a certain point. So if I'm crossing the x-axis at a certain point, that means that I'm not moving up or down, which would mean that y will be 0. So if I write this down, the x-intercept will always look like this. X, comma, 0, right? So what I mean is whatever number x is, comma, 0, as in the y will always be 0. Okay, so now if I look at the y-intercept, right, same thing, right? Y-axis, right? Our equation, right? So in this case, we're dealing with linear functions, right? So our equation will come through and it'll cross at a certain point somewhere, right? So if I'm crossing at a certain point on the y-axis, that means that I am not moving left or right. So the x will be 0. So it'll always look like this. 0, comma, whatever the y point is, right? So let's dive into some examples. So the first one we have is this. We've got a graph. Okay, and we have to find the y-intercept and the x-intercept. So let's label this. We have y-intercept. Okay, so remember, we always know that the y-intercept is going to start with a 0, and then in this case, it's crossing at the 1, right? So you can see that right there. So 1. And then the x-intercept, we know it's always going to be something comma 0. And so when you look at the graph, you can see that it's crossing at the -2, right? For the x-axis, right? We know this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. X is horizontal, y is vertical. So -2. Okay, so now let's do this again, but this time we're looking at a table. So for number 2, I don't know why that line is there. Okay, so for number 2, here we go. So we're looking for the y-intercept and the x-intercept. So again, all I have to do is look for when x equals 0. So I can see that right here. So that would be the y-intercept, right? Because if x is 0, then y will be 6. And then if I'm looking for the x-intercept, that means that y will be 0, and that happens right here. So we have -4, comma, 0. That's the x-intercept, and then 0, comma, 6. That's the y-intercept. And if we officially write that out as a point, remember, it'll look like this. -4, comma, 0 for the x, and 0, comma, 6 for the y. All right, let's dive into some other examples now. So we have graph the equation. Okay, so what I want you to do, again, is use x and y intercepts in order to graph this. So let's draw our graph first. Okay, so we're ready to graph. So let's start with the y-intercept. Well, remember, for the y-intercept, all I have to do is plug in 0 for y. So let's do that. If I plug in 0 for y, it'll say -3/7 times 0. Well, that'll just be 0, which means it'll be y equals 4. So we have 0, 4. That's our first point. Now, by the way, this equation right here has been written in intercept form, right? So slope-intercept form. I can see the slope, which is -3/7, and I can see the y-intercept, which is 4. Y equals mx plus b. That is the format that this equation was written in. Now, I could use the slope right now to finish graphing this, or I can solve this using the intercept form, which would be plugging in 0 for y so I could find the x-intercept. So if I plug in 0 for y, it would say 0 equals -3/7 times x plus 4. So if I add this to the other side, 3/7 times x plus 4, whoops, equals 4, then I know that my x-intercept, I have to solve for x, so I have to multiply by 7/3, right? That would be dividing, right, by 3/7, so multiplying by the reciprocal. So if I multiply by 7/3, then I get my x-intercept, and that is going to be at 28/3. Now, that's obviously a really weird, place. So 28 divided by 3, let's say that is about 9 1/3, right? So we know that we're going to be crossing at 9 1/3. And so let's say that is going to be 1. Okay, so there you have it, right? So what I did was I used the slope to go down 3 and then to the right 7. And then I also know that we're going to be crossing right at 9 1/3 as well on the x-axis. And so if I go like this, look at that, they all line up. All right, so that's how you do that. Now let's do one more example. So again, if I plug in 0 for x, right, it would say 12 times 0, and that would be 0. And then it would say 4y equals 8. Well, what times 4 would equal 8? Well, that would be 2. So that means that we're going to cross at 2. So there's my y-intercept, right? Because I plugged in 0 for x. Now I can plug in 0 for y. So if I plug in 0 for y, then it's going to say 4 times 0, and that would be 0. And then it'll say 12x equals 8, right? So let's write that down. 12x equals 8. So I can divide by 12 on both sides, and that will equal x equals 8/12, but if I reduce that, then that would be 2/3. So we know that we're going to cross at 2/3, right? Because if I divide 8 by 4, I would get 2, and if I divide 12 by 4, I would get 3. So 2/3 is approximately right here. And so now I can just connect these up, and there's my graph. There's my graph. All right. Great job on finishing today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, tell your friends and family. And if you want to dive deeper into chapter test work, you can check out my school platform, skool.com. The link will be in the bio below. And if you want more information on one-on-one tutoring, you can check out my website, rgtutors.com. Thank you again, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.